let me congratulate you, be the first to congratulate you on completing the Dispensational Bible Institute. Many times in your life and mine, we've started things and didn't finish. Many times there were good reasons, sometimes we just didn't finish. But here you are, and you finished. You have exemplified 2 Timothy 2:2. You've been faithful. And now that you've taken the course material and learned from the Dispensational Bible Institute what it has to offer, you are tremendously better equipped for the work of the ministry. It would be good to evaluate that, and that is the function of the test which this hour of study gives you. I'm going to be asking you just 12 questions, and I'm going to ask you to respond to each of the questions with no fewer than 300 words. I'd like you to limit to no more than 500 words. So I'm going to be willing to read 6,000 of your words about these 12 questions. And upon evaluating where you are with your response to these 12 questions, you will be graduated and certificated as a graduate of the Dispensational Bible Institute. If you take our graduation certificate and take it to Antiques Roadshow or take it to a flea market, you're going to find out it's not worth much. The information is what commends the Dispensational Bible Institute, and ultimately it is what commends you. And the function of this test is to perform the fourth of the 4 E words and to evaluate. To evaluate how this worked out for you. Now, when you have our diploma in hand, having completed the test, I believe it will be of more value than the Millard Fillmore Institute in San Francisco, which confers degrees of Doctor of Pinochle Science. A Doctor of Pinochle Science, I wouldn't want to sit down at a table with a deck of cards with him, but I don't know that that degree has much merit. There's a man runs a school. This is funny. It is the Pennington School for Boys, and it's little kids. And he gives them a DD. For them, it's a doer of good deeds. Your education is going to be what you make of it. Your edification has to do with a building. And so this quiz is intended to evaluate where you are. Essay questions. I'm aware of a Bible Institute that you go on campus and study for 3 years. And that's great. And I'm certain that they do a marvelous job. This hasn't been that. The Dispensational Bible Institute has been short. It's been intensive. There is a video school of grace teachings that takes 3 years to go through. I used to offer that program at my church. And in fact, I started more than 140 students in that school. To see 139 of them fail to finish, it became clear to me it might not be that I had 139 problem students. It might be that I had one problem school. So our approach has been different. Now, you see this? It's as much as a ream of paper, maybe more. These are the quizzes from a school you can sign up for and study for 3 years. I'm certain that it's all good. How many chapters are there in the book of Daniel? I'm not going to ask you those kinds of questions. I'm pretty sure if you don't know it's 12, you know how to find it out. I'm not oriented toward busy work and give you reams and reams of minutia to make you jump through hoops, that at the end of which it doesn't profit you. Approximately how old was Daniel in chapter 1? Doesn't the question say approximately? Then the questioner doesn't know how old he was. The Bible doesn't declare how old he was. Your guess is as good as mine. Whoever cares? Now, I'm sure it's all good. Most changes and damage to the text of the Bible was done by what date? There's a right answer to the question, and the answer given is 200 AD. Actually, the fact of the matter is it happened in 325. And I think I can make a better case. But it's not about dates. Name the 5 women in Christ's genealogy. Tell me sources of ambiguity. Where was Paul when he wrote Romans? With whom was he staying? I'm sure you need to know all that. All that. But I'm not going to, by the way, you take this more than 100 tests, you know what they're worth? Nothing. Because you pass or fail based on one test of 45 questions. You went through all of that, and the person that passes you never looks at it. We're not playing games here. This is serious business. We're not in competition. If that's what they want to do, that's great. If you're able to go on campus and participate in the school, now these don't happen to be King James people, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Now, why am I saying this? Because you need to jog loose from your thinking when you take this test. And you need to think differently as you take this test. When I send you your test back, and you have written 300 to 500 word essay answers to my 12 questions, you've written a book of your belief system. And that's what I'm interested in, is your belief system. Whoever are you? And I'll never find that out by asking you who were the women in Mary's genealogy. I'll never find that out by engaging in all of this minutia and then paying no attention to it. The Dispensational Bible Institute is more oriented toward your integrity as a believer and the integrity of your belief system. Question number 1. What do you believe about the Bible? 300 to 500 words. Question number 1. What do you believe about the Bible? Do you believe God inspired it? Do you believe it's God's Word? Do you believe it's perfect? What do you believe about the Bible? What's the function of the Bible? Now, this is a question that is built upon the material that I taught you in the Dispensational Bible Institute. I'm asking you, now that you've had your life experience, you've seen other belief systems, you've now studied the Dispensational Bible Institute, to come to a conclusion on the matter. Become fully persuaded. What do you believe about the Bible. If you want to talk to me about the red letters, if you want to talk to me about punctuation, if you want to talk to me, whatever, that's fine. What do you believe about the Bible? Question number one. What do you believe about the Bible? Question number two. How did God communicate to humanity down through the centuries of his dealings with us on earth? How did God provide his word? How did God provide direction? This obviously has a lot to do with progressive revelation. This obviously has a lot to do with signs and wonders and such like. How did God communicate to his created humanity down through these now 60 centuries? Obviously, the Bible is an important player in all of that, but it's not the only player. Question number 3. 300 to 500 words. What do you believe about the King James Bible compared to other versions and translations, compared to Greek texts and manuscripts, compared to even the Textus Receptus? What do you believe about the King James Bible? Now, you could answer that in one sentence, but you wouldn't be telling me very much. When you answer it in 300 to 500 words, by the way, if you can't type, find somebody that can. When you answer me in 300 to 500 words, you're going to be dealing with some of the specifics. You're going to be dealing with some of the textual criticism issues. So these 3 questions are based on the unit of study of manuscript evidence. And these 3 questions are intended to identify your belief system with respect to God and how he communicates. What we at the Dispensational Bible Institute are interested in assessing is the source of your belief system and your relationship to the Bible. The Bible, God's Word, how God communicates, is the essence of this section. Question number 1 was, what do you believe about the Bible? Question number 2, how did God provide his word? How did God communicate? Question number 3, what do you believe about specifically the King James Bible compared to not simply other translations in English, but to the Greek texts and lectionaries as well? So question number 4 and questions 4, 5, and 6 are centered on issues associated with dispensationalism. And in that unit of study, if we defined it and we saw why dispensationalism matters, questions 4, 5, and 6 are essays on that subject. Question number 4, then, is I want you to define dispensationalism. Use your language and explain why it matters. Define it. Explain why it matters. In your definition, feel free to include wrong definitions and call those to my understanding so that I know you understand. You understand that there's more than one kind of dispensationalism. you understand that when you define dispensationalism, you need to be more specific than our Acts 2 friends have been. And so, define dispensationalism. Identify why it matters. Question number 5. As best you can, trace dispensational thinking from Paul to you. 300 to 500 words, what you know about how dispensational thought was transmitted. I find it fascinating at the tremendous outpouring of dispensational understanding that there was after the Civil War and prior to World War I, in that 50-year time frame, 60-year time frame, tremendous number of the greatest dispensational thinkers that ever lived right there. It's interesting. Meanwhile, it didn't start there. And you already know the importance of having a knowledge of your forebears so that you don't make their mistakes and so that you stand on their shoulders and see further. Question number 5, trace dispensational thinking as best you can from Paul to you. Question number 6. What are the mechanics and practicalities of prayer in the dispensation of the grace of God? Now, verses are important in every answer. Specifics. One time when I was in college, I went to a class for the first time, and it was a class in education, they called it, to teach you how to be a teacher. And I went to this class, and I was just stunned. It was so bad. I went back and I took the midterm, and as long as I fed them their psychobabble, multicultural, feel-good pap, I could fill blue book after blue book with blue book baloney. Got an A. Never went to class again. It was time for the final. Went to class. They ask these questions. I just give them the political correct blather of the day. Got an A. Aced the midterm, aced the final, got an A in the class. I attended it exactly 3 times. That's how bad it was. I'm not looking for general banality blather. You know that about me by now. So I will relish your specifics and your Bible verses as you answer question number 6. What are the mechanics and practicalities of prayer in the dispensation of the grace of God? Prayer will be a key ingredient in your relationship to your Lord, in your relationship to your Lord's people, and in your being able to finish the race, your leg of the race that's set before you. Grace believers are very weak in this area. So by this question, I am calling it to your respectful attention. Question number 7 has to do with the unit of study on how to study the Bible for yourself and learning how to study. And question number 7, I'm going to ask you to explain to me how Bible study operates in your life and what study methods, disciplines, and study helps are of value to you. How does Bible study operate? How do you study? What do you do? I recently, several months ago, read the biography of old Ethelbert Bullinger. And he, the man who put the notes in the Acts 28 position in the companion Bible. One of the best things about that book was to look at his study and to look at his desk. And I saw a man, just by looking at his desk, I saw a man with a fertile mind, where he had on his desk in front of him was a big old roll-top desk, and in front of him was his Bible. Then over here was a whole library of books, and over here was a library, all right on his desk. And then across the top were books that he had open to different pages. And he had 2 sideboards with open books standing there. So he's reading 3, 4 books simultaneously, and he has access to another. I looked at that and I thought, there's a man at work. He had a discipline, he had a method, he had some things he was doing. How about you? What does Bible study mean to you? What do you do? How does it operate in your life? What kind of time is involved, and what kind of study helps have you found to be valuable? Number 8. I taught you about evangelism, edification, expansion, and evaluation, the 4 E words. Question number 8. What's your job relevant to each one of the 4? Where do you fit in? What is your job? What is your position with respect to evangelism? What are you doing about edification? What are you doing about expansion? What are you doing about evaluation? 300 to 500 words typed. That was question number 8. Question number 9. Question number 9 is based on material that I taught for several hours during the Dispensational Bible Institute, and the question is, how do you go about teaching Pauline dispensationalism to others? Include a carefully drawn dispensational chart. Now, when I say carefully drawn, I'm not after you going to an artist or a draftsman. I want to see verses. I want you to identify the salient issues on your chart. I'm looking for you to have learned how to draw a chart. And I'm looking for you to have a method to your madness. I'm looking for you to have a way that you know works to go about teaching dispensationalism to others. So I want to hear 300 to 500 words on that. And I want to see a chart. By now you've picked up the flavor, have you not? I'm not so oriented toward whether or not you know how to spell Shadrach, whether or not you can figure out that there's 12 chapters in the book of Daniel, or how many women were in Mary's lineage. I'm trying to get back behind your belly button into your heart of hearts and find out who you are, and see how well you are equipped for this, the work of the ministry. That's my engagement. That's my orientation. And my prayer is that you understand this and are pleased to respond. Question number 10. I want you to tell me in 300 to 500 words, what do you anticipate being obstacles or dangers that will imperil your ministry? And how are you going to deal with them? I talked with you quite a bit about ministry issues. You have a different setting than I. You have a different situation than I. You're a different person. What do you anticipate? What do you see as obstacles and dangers that can imperil your ministry, your service to the Lord? And now that you've seen those, how are you going to deal with them? You're going to wait till they show up and start flipping a coin? Or are you now going to identify the potential and identify the solution, so that if the potential manifests itself, you've got your answer? What are the obstacles? What are the dangers? What do you see that imperils your ministry in the future? And how are you going to deal with those things? Now, the remaining two questions here in the Dispensational Bible Institute's quiz have to do with the section of studies dealing with interpersonal ministry issues. Number 11. When it comes to counseling, funerals, weddings, when it comes to your pulpit ministry, when it comes to your private ministry, perhaps even dealing with the difficult things, what is your overriding purpose and function? You're going to be doing a lot of different things, and with all due respect, after a few years, some of it's going to seem like busy work. You're going to be engaged in a lot of things you've done before. I mean, the first time you do a funeral, wow, that's a big deal. But after a while, it's another funeral. I don't want you to become rote. I don't want you to see these things as mundane. And so I'm trying to evaluate by how you answer this question. What is your overriding function in all of these activities? In each of these, in any of these activities, what is your function? What do you take with you? What do you bring to the table? What is your value? Ministry life is often seen as what goes on Sunday morning from about 10 o'clock until about noon. But actually, that isn't even the tip of the iceberg. You're going to have the phone calls in the middle of the night. I had one about a year and a half ago in the middle of the night, and the woman is screaming. I can barely understand what she's saying as she's considering aborting her baby. What do you bring to that table? When the young man in his 30s says, I'd like to speak to you in private just for a moment, and when you do, he tells you about his mother committing suicide or attempting to. What do you bring to that table? Who are you? What's your point? Why do we need you? When the young couple and all the flutter and all the glitter and oh, they're going to get married and oh, everything, peaches and apple pie. Why do they need you? Couldn't they just play a tape? Do you take this woman? What do they need you for? What is your overriding function? What do you bring to the table in all of your ministry activities? 300 to 500 words. That's 11 questions. 1 to go. Now these are essay questions, and Winston Churchill wrote that he pitied undergraduates because he sees that they're living frivolous lives in the midst of precious, fleeting opportunity. What do you think about campus life? And a lot of it is about ball games and parties. And he's making the point that they're doing that amidst precious, fleeting opportunity. Winston Churchill said, "After all, every man's life must be nailed to some cross, either of thought or action." You understand the kinds of questions I'm asking you and what they're intended to elicit in your thinking? The quality and character and integrity of you and your ministry and your understanding of the issues. That's what I'm interested in, not how many chapters there are in the book of Daniel. Question number 12. Now that you have completed the Dispensational Bible Institute, throw your hat in the air, do whatever other silly thing you want to do. What are your specific goals and objectives for the next 12 months, for the next 5 years, at the end of 20 years? 3 gradations in time. Now, if you're a student of the Dispensational Bible Institute and you're 75 years old, you can skip the last bunch. I worked for the largest retailer on planet Earth. They've since been eclipsed by Walmart, but the Kroger Company was the largest retailer. It is still the largest purveyor of foodstuffs. Just as kind of a byproduct of who they were, they owned the largest fleet of trucks of any company on planet Earth. A huge company. And I learned from them something that was called management by objectives. My boss would sit down with me and say, "Gary, this is your job description, this is your area of responsibility. I want you to tell me," my boss said, "you tell me what you're going to accomplish in the next year." So it was my job then to know what I was supposed to be doing and tell him what I thought I could do in the next year. I was 100 times, I wish he'd have drawn it up. I was a whole lot harder on me than he ever would have been. And, you know, I'm saying I can do this, and I thought I could. But when push came to shove, I found out I wasn't quite as talented as I thought I was. But I had objectives. And since I wrote them, and since they were my objectives and not something handed down from on high, I was dedicated to accomplishing them. This question is intended to put you on the train of thought to manage yourself by having objectives. Don't be a closet Calvinist and just let it happen. You be as your Apostle Paul, and you set a course, and you follow that course, and do the work. Now that you've completed the Dispensational Bible Institute, what are your specific goals and objectives for the next year? The next 5 years, the next 20 years, age appropriate, obviously. That is going to be interesting reading. 12 questions, a minimum 300 words. I'm willing to read 3,600 of your words, maximum 500 words. I'm willing to read 6,000 of your words. If you've got something to say, I'll read it. I'll evaluate it in the terms of the school that you've taken, the Dispensational Bible Institute, and we would be then happy to confer upon you a Doctor of Prenuptial Science. We'll give you commendation and graduation. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, gave Bibles to every student that graduated starting in 1842. It stopped giving them out in 1972 and hasn't given out a Bible since. For 130 years, every student that graduated University of North Carolina was given a King James Bible. I don't know what I could give you beyond the information that came from the Dispensational Bible Institute. I'm happy to send you a diploma. I'm happy to commend you to others. It is a source of joy to my heart that you finished the Dispensational Bible Institute and that now you're taking the test. What's going to matter ultimately is what you do with what you've learned. What's going to matter ultimately is your investment in 2 Timothy 2:2, that you teach faithful men, that they may teach others also. It is my hope and prayer that that is what we've accomplished with this, the Dispensational Bible Institute, that you've been faithful to it. Thank you for that. Now will you teach others also? Will you teach them no other doctrine? I look forward to receiving your test answers typed. Send them to me, Box 87, Alpha, A-L-P-H-A, Alpha, Ohio, 45301. That's my post office box. Box 87, Alpha, Ohio, 45301. When Calvin Coolidge was president, he had been associated with Amherst University. Old Calvin was out of the country at the time, and now Amherst University was having his graduation. The president of Amherst University and Calvin Coolidge, the president, were close friends. The president of Amherst asked Calvin Coolidge to send a cable of greetings to the graduates of Amherst University that would be read upon the occasion of their graduation. Well, President Calvin Coolidge was happy to comply. And so, dutifully and out of love for the university, Calvin Coolidge sent his cablegram. The president of Amherst University took the podium and said to the crowd of graduates and to their parents and friends that he had received the cablegram from the President of the United States. As he said that, there was applause. Some people stood, some people cheered. He unfolded the message, and the crowd fell silent. And the president of Amherst University stood to read. Greetings from Calvin Coolidge. There's nothing more to say. Press on. Do the work.